Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon and The Blackest Heart, both books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I'm going to be reviewing The Justice of Kings by Richard Swan. Okay, so this is a new debut that's come out within the last month, published by Orbit Books. I'll be honest, the title, The Justice of Kings, isn't that really doing it for me. However, everything else about this book is fucking dope. Everything. And let's start with the cover. The cover is painted. You know I love graphic design and cover illustration, and this is dynamite. This is painted by an illustrator by the name of Martina Fakova. It's spelled Fakova. Martina Fakova. And what a great job the illustrator did. I love this. I love that the title is covering the illustration with the nice, elegant font. We've got the name of the author down here. It's just got a great look. I mean, this is a sharp-looking book to have on your bookshelf all the way around. Absolutely cool. So I was in the bookstore browsing around. Didn't really know anything. Well, I just happened to see this in the Barnes & Noble. So I picked it up. Said, okay, here's a new book. I immediately go to the maps. If it's a fantasy book, I immediately go to the maps because I can usually tell if I'm going to like the writer's writing style just by the way he's named the cities and towns, mountains, and provinces in his map, or her map. In this case, Richard Swan gives us a great map where all of the cities, rivers, towns, forests, and provinces and things sound like they actually belong in an actual place. And that's really important to me because a lot of times I see maps where just the stuff, it just seems like just randomly made up mumbo jumbo. But this map has some stuff that really seems like it's grounded and rooted in some actual, cultural, each town looks like its name has some cultural significance to the place, of which it belongs. I love that. Then I decided I would read the first couple pages. Again, I was correct in my assessment, just based virtually off the map, in that Richard writes with a very strong voice. The opening is atmospheric. It is vivid. His writing style is not bland. It's a notch above, and it's not pretentious or trying too hard to be clever. It just seemed to hit all the right notes and tones for me, and that's important because I just love gorgeous writing, and Richard Swan is doing it in spades right from the get-go. So I purchased the book. Looking at the map, reading the first couple pages, purchased the book, took it home that night, read the first 200 pages that night. Absolutely loving it. Got up early the next morning, finished the next 200 pages, and I was done with the book, and I'm like, this has got to be the best fantasy debut that I've read in a long time. Not only that, but probably the best fantasy book that I've read since J. Kristoff's Nevernight. And because if you watch my review of J. Kristoff's Nevernight, you know how much I love that series. And this is just as strong, if not stronger. This might actually be more for me and my tastes than even Nevernight was. What's it about? Well, it's a first-person told book. It's told from the perspective of Helena. She's a 19-year-old orphan girl who's sort of been rescued by this guy named Von Volt. I think that's how I pronounce the name. Let me look at the inside here. Conrad Von Volt. Yes. So she's rescued by this guy named Conrad Von Volt, who is sort of, for lack of a better word, an investigator, like we would see in our own police departments. People rise up from officer to sergeant to lieutenant to investigator. And so he's sort of like an investigator for the realm, and he goes around and investigates crimes or unnatural things or just people that the king wants investigated for whatever reason. And so Helena becomes his sort of protege. They've also got another traveling companion named Dubine Bressinger, who is a bit of the comic relief of the trio, because Von Volt is very stoic, very no-nonsense, businesslike. Helena, for the first little while, doesn't say a whole hell of a lot. She's pretty quiet. And actually kind of bored with her job, but she doesn't really want to. She'd like to leave the job. She's just kind of sick and tired of traveling to different town and different town and different town and investigating these petty little crimes over and over and over. And it just seems like it's never ending. And she's kind of grown bored with it. And so she doesn't say a whole lot, but she doesn't want to leave her situation because she feels a little bit of, she feels like she owes Von Volt something, because he is the one that rescued her from the gutters of, the city that she was an orphan in. She was sort of like a gutter rat, and he sort of rescued her and brought her up to train with him she's like his protege. Anyway, so these three roll into a town, and the first town they're going to, they've got, it's Von Volt, his taskmaster, his taskman, Dubine Bressinger, and then Helena, who's 19. They roll into this town. They've also got another dude with them who's like this shady priest. Anyway, they roll into the first town, and they have to investigate some witches or druids that might be out in the wood doing some pagan magic or whatever that's illegal and against the religious rules. And so that's what they do. They find out that there is a witch and some pagan druids and things like that out in the... But they're not doing magic. They're doing more sleight of hand. The thing that we learn is that Von Volt, as an investigator, has several magical powers. Now, the first magical power is he's got this voice that he can use that will pull the truth out of people. I think that's kind of like in the book Dune. But anyway, he's got this voice that he can use, and it's like it's like the voice of Sauron that Gandalf uses, in the Fellowship of the Ring movie at the Council of Elrond, while Gandalf stands up and starts using the voice of Sauron. That's kind of what we're dealing with here, but he can pull the truth out of people. Now, later on in the book, we find out he has a much more grim and dark type of magic that he can use too. I'm not going to talk to you about that, because that is super cool and super really weird and bizarre and dark and grim, and you can discover that as you read, because I don't want to ruin those scenes for you. Anyway, they travel to another town, and it's called Galen's Vale, and they have to investigate a murder. And this is where I will start to read the back flap, because it really does explain what's happening. The empire of the wolf simmers with unrest. Rebels, heretics, and powerful patricians all challenge the power of the imperial throne. Only the order of justice stands in the way of chaos. Sir Conrad Von Volt is the most feared justice of all. He's an investigator, upholding the law by way of sharp mind, arcane powers, and skill as a swordsman. And he's a badass swordsman, I will say that. There are some cool scenes. At his side stands Helena Sedanka, his talented protege, orphaned by the wars that forged the empire. When the pair investigate the murder of a provincial aristocrat, they unearth a conspiracy that stretches to the very top of imperial society. As the stakes rise and become ever more personal, Von Volt and Helena must make a choice. Will they abandon the laws they've sworn to uphold in order to protect the empire? Now, it talks as them as a pair, but there are actually three people in their group. We cannot forget Dubine Bressinger, the task man that is there with them every step of the way, cracking jokes and being a wise, sarcastic guy, and he is really one of my favorite. Well, all three of them together. That's the strength of this book. All three of those characters and the way they interact is what propels this story through all of these investigations. Like I said, clearly the narrator, Helena, says very little at the beginning, and Dubine is clearly the comic relief. Helen is gangly and unsure of herself, whereas her two people, Bressinger and Von Volt, the two men she's traveling with, are very, very confident in what they are about and what they're doing. And she's just not. She's just got a lot of insecurities. And it really shows up a lot when they're in Galen's Vale, when she meets a knight, a watchman that she sort of fancies. And the two men start teasing her about it. Like, oh, you like the guy. Oh, you like him. You in love with him. And she's like, no, 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 I don't. You know, but it's kind of cool to see how that relationship, it's got a very cool, heartbreaking, sort of romance slash friend zone slash not romance slash a lot of stuff going on in that way, which really was another part of the book that I thought was handled brilliantly. And I loved everything about this. It was almost like this book was written for me. It was not about major quests. It wasn't about dark lords trying to come down and take over the world. It's like a murder mystery novel set in medieval times in a fantasy world. It's a murder mystery set in a fantasy world. That's what it is. So we're not looking at earth-shattering events, at least in this first book. Judging after reading this first book, maybe what they discover in this book might lead to some things that are typical toward fantasy, where, you know, we've got to save the whole world now. But the first book, at least, keeps us focused on these three characters and just the task at hand, which is solving this murder. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. This is an absolute 10 out of 10. I cannot recommend it enough for fantasy fans and people who love mystery novels too.